and her Irish accent is inspiring. Brittany hopes to continue this journey no matter where it takes her.
This is an excerpt from a piece called The Saddler. My great-grandmother's name was Flora, which means flower. The name can also be derived from the Saint Florian. She is the patron saint of firefighters. As my grandmother put it, her mother, Flora McLaughlin, was a hellion. A bit like myself, she doesn't forget to add. Flora married Patrick McLaughlin. Together, they had my grandmother and 11 other children. Throughout our conversation, my grandmother romanticized her parents' relationship and her father's disposition. She remembered Patrick as a patient, loving, quiet, humble, and altruistic gentleman. However, when she started to talk about her mother, my grandmother took a drag of her cigarette, exhaled, and laughed. Then me mother ruled with an iron fist, just like I do with you. She did all the chastising. She kept a cane up the chimney, and if anyone got out of line, she'd bring it down the chimney and give him a whack. Apparently, Patrick McLaughlin was also a lover of whiskey. My grandmother remembered her parents fighting when her father would come home drunk. Flora would refuse to talk to her husband and make him pour his newly purchased pint down the kitchen sink. He begged me mother to speak to him when she wasn't speaking to him. He'd say, "Och, Flora, go on and speak to me." Another time, Flora beat Patrick with his own belt because he wouldn't get up for Mass. All I remember is he just took the covers up around him. I asked my grandmother if Patrick and Flora were opposites. Sort of, yeah, but they were nuts about each other. They took a nap every Sunday after Sunday dinner. Me mother and father. That was their hobby, making babies. Out of those 12 babies, my grandmother was the second youngest. She was also the sister that slept till noon, skipped down on Mass, and never did her chores. When my grandmother turned 21, she eloped and moved from Northern Ireland to the United States with an Italian Marine. Now, my Italian grandfather was not a quiet man. He was just as much as a pistol as my grandmother. I do remember a strong chemistry between my grandparents, but I also remember heated arguments and plates flying down the dining room stairs. I asked my grandmother, "Do you think Flora and Patrick's relationship was like you and Papa?" My grandmother scoffed and responded, "It was better, Brittany. Me mother and me father, they weren't a different race. They were the same race and the same town, you know. I married an Italian that was off the wall, and I was off the wall. Between his Irish and my Italian, the only good thing about an Italian and Irish marriage is that they make beautiful children, and that's the truth." I was rather surprised at her honesty, but I guess it did put things into perspective. My grandmother is a tough old lady, but the only time I ever saw her cry was when my grandfather passed away. He had just turned 60 and she was 54. For months, my grandmother sat in the dark of her living room, refusing to turn on the lamp or answer the front door. Flora lost Patrick at an early age as well. One of the most touching moments during my grandmother's interview shed light on Flora's devotion to her husband. Me mother wore black for 15 years after me father died. She never wore any color but black after he died. We weren't even allowed to put the television on. There was a pause, and then suddenly my grandmother said, "Brittany, me mother and father loved each other dearly. And me dad used to say, 'None of ye's as good looking as your mother.' That's what he would always say. He loved her to death."